area really needs to be this way. Some of you I recognize, last night we were up at the mill area. Around the sawmill on North 95, short of Silverwood from here.
Chilco Road.
There's a lot of industrial looking stuff around there,
Yeah,
and that looks like a place for industry. In support of that sawmill and in support of the idea that living near a sawmill is kind of loud and lights at night, they've done a great job in terms of buffering that area.
Try a crushing operation that runs 24/7, 7 days a week, and then you ask the guy, why can't you cut it down from 7 to 10 so some of us to get up in the morning to go to work, and they tell you, why don't you get earplugs, and then you call code enforcement, and they tell you, you know what, Mr. Kramer, there ain't a damn thing I can do for you. You people gotta live with it, because a pit's been condemned and closed for 10 years because some out-of-state developer buys it from Seattle, puts a crushing operation in there, and they pretty much tell us to eat this.
So if the zoning were different, that wouldn't have happened.
Well, the thing is, the zoning was established in 1972, so they grandfathered it in. They stuck in there with whoever is on the take on that bullshit, and they sit there and they take it, and the Scarsilla comes in from Seattle, puts in the crumping off because it's good for the public because the road's going in. But meanwhile, my property values and 91 other of my neighbors are saying, I gotta eat this shit sandwich.
This is why we have this process, is to learn these lessons. And I wish there was more that could be done to have prevented the sorts of impacts that are there. But when you put rules in place, that's the problem. You know, if you didn't get the rules right, we can't vote on it after the fact. You got to figure it out in advance. We have an industrial district, and we want to protect against that stuff by having that industrial district buffered. And I feel for you. That was an awful situation. I totally feel for that situation. But that's why we need to get this code right. I think it illustrates that point. Sir. No.
Wait, this guy's been waiting a long time.
Right here. Yes,
you got
the muddy water for me in this situation is the transition between the existing neighborhoods of, say, the 5-acre neighborhoods and the larger parcels. Is this something akin to other areas where they have urban growth boundaries? Are you seeking to infill population urban areas with densities, heavier densities of population, rather than expand? Well, that's what it looks like to me, that you're starting to set up a zone or a boundary that beyond this boundary, well, it's already been alluded to, it's harder to do things on some of these other properties. If you're in an existing neighborhood, it's easier. When you go out, it sounds like it starts to get harder. Now, I think part of this process removes the organics. In other words, towns spring up where there's a need. When you start planning from the top down, you remove some of the organics. If somebody needs to build a plant out in a really far area, there are mines way out, from our history here, you remove some of the organics that can happen when you remove people's rights and their freedoms to do what they want with their land. And so I guess that's two questions. Do you have an urban growth boundary? Are you seeking to infill the urban area before you allow development further out? Does your plan include that? And the other one is there any kind of provision for people that are out past the existing neighborhoods to have what's affecting them? We're talking mostly about people who are living closer to town. How about those that are further out? Those who are on 40, 80, 160 acres. There are a lot of property owners have in excess of 1,000 acres. So how does this affect that?
Let me just submit point, counterpoint. What you're talking about is, shouldn't we be able to do anything we want? And I think you just saw the frustration, the heartfelt frustration of a gentleman who would suggest that the answer to that question is not necessarily. And that's really what you're talking about. I have a slide that I've shown in Kootenai County several times. Some of you may have seen it that have been with us from the beginning. It zeroes in on a pizza shop that says grand opening, small building. It says I should be able to do anything I want. But then don't let my neighbors do that. And it shows that was the holdout and everything around it is high rise. It's an extreme point. But I think that this gentleman who wants to sleep would prefer having high rises to a rock crushing plant. So anything you want, the idea is that there is a location and that there's an interest, there's a public interest in some of that to a degree. Now, zoning is not central planning, and neither is comprehensive planning. The law is Jenga and it's Jello. And when there's a market force and a political response, they come together. Zoning maps change frequently. The commercial zoning around Apple, everybody know how much commercial zoning there is at that interchange on Apple? Is there anybody that has done a real estate market study for retailers in their lifetime? I have.
Of course not.
I can tell you just by looking at it that I don't think that if that area that's zoned commercial is built out at a 20% floor area ratio, which is typical for retail, 15 to 20% of the land as a retail building, there isn't enough market to support that much retail development out there. There aren't enough people to support that much retail in that location. Even with Silverwood, it probably wouldn't work. But it's okay. It's zoned commercial. There are smaller developments that will go in there. The market will respond over time. And I'm not a central planner to say yes or no to that. I'm not a central planner at all. But what I'm saying is you can rezone things. Yes, there are districts that will accommodate all sorts of stuff. Bayview is not an incorporated place. It is a settlement that arose out of need, and it has natural limitations on its growth because it's surrounded by federal land and other counties and so forth, and challenging slopes and water and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I mean, Bayview was accommodated in the code, and we've talked to people in Bayview that are relatively happy with how that happens, and we'll talk to more people in Bayview when we go out with the maps. Yes, there are ways to do things in the unincorporated county. And the original proposals that come out of this, after they're vetted by people all around the county, there will be some people that say, we need to change this. And instead of getting mad, they can come in with a rezoning application and actually do it. And we don't want that to be terribly expensive to do or difficult. The law requires a planning and zoning commission hearing or a planning commission hearing and then a public hearing before the board of commissioners, because that's what the state says for that. But indeed, the zoning maps change, the plans change, people participate, they change. Some of you have a future land use map. Those things change. And in fact, we think that your future land use map punts the issue of the transition and should be changed. The transition should go away when you figure out how the zoning is supposed to work, and you should have a plan that actually speaks to it. You should have a plan that actually speaks to it. So, but at that point, when that plan is no longer satisfactory, you do something different. I didn't plan to be a zoning consultant. I got here, my plans changed. You know, it fits, it works. But that's what happens in communities too. Communities are like organisms in their own right. And it doesn't hurt for communities to plan ahead and then change the plans as circumstances require. So yes, we can accommodate everything with the code that's out there now and a lot of new stuff. Will the original maps that come out of this process allow that kind of stuff everywhere? No. But will they be flexible enough? Will there be enough in this code and in this process to do that? Yes. Will existing interests be protected? Todd, stop it with the rhetorical questions. That's ridiculous. Yes. Sir.
Todd, did you have a chance to see the press release that was given out earlier and had some claims, spins, and truth? Did you have a chance to really look at that at all?
I have seen the press release.
Okay. Did you, because I'm specifically, you touched on the taking issue, and that's one that interested me quite a bit.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
On takings.
Takings.
We touched on it earlier.
Yes.
And one of the comments was the proposed ordinance constitutes taking. You spoke to that and said it isn't. And then you referenced the U.S. Supreme Court and Idaho Supreme Court. But I'm curious, how do you respond to the 1995 additional property rights protections beyond simple takings were added, specifically Idaho Code 67 ... Quote, ensure that land use policies, restrictions, conditions, and fees do not violate private property rights, adversely impact property values, or create unnecessary technical limitations on the use of property. In other words, they're saying, right, it's maybe not a taking, but it sure smells like a taking, and it quacks like a taking, so is it a taking?
Right. So if you apply that to your current ordinances, which is your default position, right? It's very, very difficult to adopt your current ordinances today if you were worried about unnecessary hurdles, right? So we're trying to fix a bunch of that stuff. Now, adversely affecting property values is a very interesting point. If you look at the purposes of zoning under Idaho Code, and it wasn't repealed by this 1995 Act, so the purposes are still there, they're still legitimate, and all these things have to be read together. You can't read this out of context. Nobody's going to let you do that in court. Now, So basically it says, the purpose